Hey, friends, welcome to episode 551 of the My 123 Cents podcast. I am Kevin Huntsberger, joined this week once again by Chad Smart. And before we get started, I am in a makeshift studio. If you are watching, working on repainting and reorganizing what is going to be my new designated space and area. But before we get too deep into the show, I also wanted to shout out Keaton Pesca, who has become my vintage wrestling shirt dealer for the last couple of months. He's given me a couple of new shirts, new old shirts. This is WrestleMania 17. It's a pretty sweet shirt. So Keaton Pesca, I think it's Snack Rack Vintage on Instagram, but I appreciate the shirt. Chad, you're sporting. Is that Mariah? I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see. Is that Mariah May or is that Tony Storm?
This is a Mariah May shirt. I sporting it because one, it was just laying on the edge of my bed, so it was easy to grab this morning. And I figured since she just made her debut in NXT, we would promote that a little
Jennifer
bit.
June, I hear, is going to be her new.
Is it? I thought it was going to be Delilah in December.
That works too. That works.
Better than Octavia October.
What?
Better than Octavia October.
Yeah. Well, I stole the Jennifer June from the Hurricane on Twitter. So, yeah, not an original joke there by any means, but we're going to talk about. We put a topic out on social media earlier in the week. Since it is Father's Day coming up this week on Sunday, I thought maybe a little family feud stuff going on and seeing some father-son, mostly father-son matchups, but we'll get to those in just a few minutes. Here's the deal, Chad. I am not, I've made this clear on the podcast before. I don't really like talking about current stuff because, A, I think it's overdone by a lot of the independent podcasters. Even Conrad and his collection of shows, ad-free shows, they tease a topic and then they start talking about current stuff and then the topic at hand. For example, he and Jeff Jarrett have been talking about Gail Kim now for probably about 6 weeks, and it keeps getting pushed back because they talk about current stuff. And granted, there's a lot going on in current wrestling. Everyone has an opinion, but I do want to touch on, because we had a couple of listeners, Ken Johnson in particular, who had asked about the R-Truth release and said this is a great opportunity to talk about that instead of what you're planning to talk about. And I guess since now it's kind of come full circle with Money in the Bank, and we'll talk about Money in the Bank and Worlds Collide and some of your thoughts on those things. But again, I like talking about the retro stuff, the stuff that a lot of times you talk about things that it's not necessarily what you remember seeing or hearing, but how you felt as a result of that. And for me, talking about the 80s and 90s in wrestling, it just brings back those fun, good time memories. Today's stuff, maybe in 20 years, we'll be talking about more in depth. Knock on wood. But Chad, give me your.
We even remembered.
Yeah, if we remember, that's the thing. You know, we've talked about it before. We can rattle off all the WrestleManias, 1 through 10, the matches, and this, that, and the other. I'm going to have trouble remembering what happened at Money in the Bank less than 24 hours ago as we're recording this. So I'll give you the floor, though. What were your thoughts, impressions of Money in the Bank? And tell me a little bit about your snafu with
Worlds Collide.
Worlds Collide.
All right. Well, first, I mean, to touch on what you were talking about, the nostalgia or not touching on recent subjects. I think also for a podcast or a video, for a fan that may discover this show down the road, evergreen topics play better than, a recap of something that just happened this week or, talking about a weekly thing.
Yeah.
So I get that. So my snafu is I was out on Saturday when Worlds Collide and Money in the Bank were happening. So when I got home, I'm like, okay, I'll sit down and I'll start watching Worlds Collide because I figured whatever happened on Worlds Collide would be referenced on Money in the Bank. So I wanted to watch it. So I go to Peacock. There's no Worlds Collide. I wait and wait for like an hour. There's no Worlds Collide because the Money in the Bank show was over, but the live feed was still live. So I couldn't watch it. It was like, just gave me the, this event has ended screen. So then, around 9:00, finally the Money in the Bank replay was up, but still no Worlds Collide. And I did not realize that it was a YouTube only show. And, I guess there's no way to know that, especially since I was staying off social media to not spoil Money in the Bank or Worlds Collide. Like, they didn't say during Money in the Bank, oh, if you missed it, you can go back and watch it on YouTube. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because I mentioned before we started recording that I felt Worlds Collide was poorly promoted. And not necessarily, I shouldn't say poorly promoted, but the matches themselves, the luchadors that were coming in from AAA were not promoted enough to get me excited to watch the show, or even interested, or even knowledgeable about who was going to be on the show.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I said that we were going to argue on this one. They promoted the event. I felt like, because we've talked about it before. I don't watch SmackDown at all. I don't have access to USA, so SmackDown is out for me. I don't watch NXT because I don't have the CW anymore where I live. I do watch Raw. I did kind of skim through it last week. So, but I listen to other podcasts where they do talk about it. So I feel like I saw enough social media posts or things that I knew that it was going to be on YouTube. So that's why I told you when we started, or before we started recording, that it was going to be, or that it was on YouTube, and that's why you couldn't find it on Peacock. And I don't know why that decision was made. I don't know if there was a limit to the amount of time that they could stream live on. I don't know. I don't know what the rationale was behind it. Maybe to give, because everybody worldwide could watch Peacock, and this was, I'm going to air quote, an international event with it being featuring the AAA stars. So I don't know what the rationale or the reasoning behind it was, but I felt like the big match, the El Vikingo, I believe I'm saying his name right, against Chad Gable was widely promoted. They mentioned some of the other matches, but again, I'm not, I'm that WWE guy who is trying to learn something new here at 52. So the names aren't going to stick with me. I will tell you, and I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but if you haven't been on social media yet, there is a lot of buzz around a new, and I think he's going to do that crossover thing at some point, because already he's picking up that buzz, and that's Mr. Iguana. It looks like Goldust with a iguana puppet. I mean, he's got green face paint. I have not seen him wrestle. I didn't hear a word of him, but just that first impression picture, this guy is what that WWE marketing branding machine is going to be behind. People are going to have foam iguanas or little puppet iguanas at some point before it's all said and done. So that was my big takeaway. I won't spoil anything else for you from the show, which you probably, though, if you watched Money in the Bank, you know that a match was created as a result of World's Collide.
Yeah, and I know they mentioned, during the women's Money in the Bank, they mentioned Stephanie Vakir wrestling and winning, and then they talk about, I think they showed like Vikingo in the audience and mentioned he beat Chad Gable. So I know those stuff.
Well, and then Dominic Mysterio wrestling
Octagon Junior.
Octagon.
Yeah,
of what happened too. So.
Yeah. So I don't know. I may go back, watch it eventually, but again, my history with AAA and Lucha Libre, Mexican Lucha Libre, as opposed to Japanese Lucha Libre or Chinese Lucha Libre. I don't know. For me, it's, and the Dominic Octagon Jr. match was like this too, where it's a little too gymnastic. It's a little too choreographed for my taste, where it kind of takes me out most of the time, because it doesn't feel like a fight. It just feels like a gymnastics routine.
Isn't Will Ospreay your favorite wrestler?
He is not, but also if you watch his matches, you would see that there is some fighting in his matches. But yeah,
I'm just teasing you. I'm teasing. I do find it interesting that WWE, not interesting, but I like the fact that WWE or AAA tried to make a distinction. We didn't have the same commentary crew. Conan and Corey Graves did commentary for Worlds Collide. I read a rumor that Mike Tenay, they were trying to get Mike Tenay involved. You saw that too?
Yeah, because he made his debut at the original Worlds Collide in '94.
Okay,
and
that was a WCW event, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. So, what do you think about them kind of dusting off the name and kind of trying to go back? Because I do feel like sometimes they go for the nostalgia, and then sometimes, I've heard that, back in the Vince McMahon era, if it was a failed WCW property, that's why we never really got a proper Halloween Havoc or some of those other events, because Vince viewed those as failures and not being successful, and he didn't want to associate WWE with that. But what do you think about kind of using some of that nostalgia and bringing back, we talked about Jesse Ventura a couple of weeks ago on Saturday Night's Main Event, but does the nostalgia work in this case with Mike Tenay? I mean, I haven't seen or heard from Mike Tenay since he left TNA a few years ago, but does that work for you?
I would have to hear Mike Tenay to know, because is he still watching AAA? Is he familiar with the product? Which, that's my thing with when they bring out Jesse is a lot of times he doesn't seem to know what's going on.
Right.
And so that distracts from the match. So if Mike Tenay is still knowledgeable and keeps up with it and can, I'll even throw JR in here. The complaint about JR over the last few years in AEW is that he just seems like an old, bitter man who criticizes the product more than enhances it. So without hearing Mike Tenay call something, I can't say. I mean, it would have been nice maybe to hear him again. And I've only seen a few comments about Conan's commentary that weren't too complimentary. So, I mean, it would be nice to hear tonight, even if they just brought him in for like one or two matches just to explain some things. But again, how old is Tenay these days? Probably, I'm guessing 70s.
I would say at least 60s? In his 60s, late 60s. But well, and that brings up, and this could be a topic for a whole nother episode, but we obviously can see it in the ring when a wrestler has maybe gone too long, past their career. Mike Tenay just turned 70 this year, so. But I think we're kind of starting to see that or hear that with commentators as well. You mentioned JR, and I love JR. Wishing him well as he recovers from his cancer surgery and as he's on the mend. But I think Jesse Ventura is another example of they've been away from the product, or even maybe not as quick as they were. Obviously, we all get older. I mean, it's just a part of the whole life thing. But it is interesting to think about. I always, obviously you see the wear and tear of the men and women in the ring, but never really thought about it very much on the outside of the ring perspective. So it's an interesting. I don't know why that just struck me, but it really did. So,
well, I was gonna say, I figure you saw it in your news broadcasting when people get old and try to read the news. It doesn't work as well. But and I think again, it's not only age; it's if they follow the product and if they know it, and if you can highlight, if you can enhance a product. I'm sure age doesn't matter, even if you're not as, if Bobby Heenan were still around and had lost his step on his quick responses, that really wouldn't detract as long as he was still, putting over the wrestlers in the ring, or, not just complaining about the new generation that are doing, more athletic spots than just a headlock or a toe hold. So,
well, and I will admit, I did not get to watch all of Money in the Bank. I think I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned on last week, but this past Saturday was my wife and I anniversary. We went to the tiny little town of Shawneetown to record a Hunsberger Chronicles, which you can watch on YouTube or TikTok. but also the 1,000 Pound Sisters were there, were a fan of the show. My wife was a little more not wanting to be there than me and our friends were, but anyway, we didn't get back until after the show had started. So I kind of started watching it, and I didn't go back and watch uh, from the beginning, but I picked it up from the Intercontinental title match. I don't think I missed a whole lot. I know I missed the women's money.
The women's match, yeah.
And we're not going to go match by match or do an analysis, but were you surprised that Naomi, or as Wade Barrett says, Naomi, was the winner of that match?
No, I figured, especially when they introduced everybody coming out, because I forgot who all was in the match. Naomi made the most sense because, I mean, real quick, Alexa Bliss is kind of returned, but not returned.
Yeah.
So I didn't figure she would win. Stephanie Fakir and Julia, I don't really feel like are on this realm to hold the money. I don't think the money in the bank briefcase would have helped their character. Roxanne, I think, has time. You know, she's still relatively new to WWE as well. And so just process of elimination, I thought Naomi had the best storyline going to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were banking on either her or Stephanie. Rhea Ripley, you know.
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on her? I mean, I love Rhea Ripley. I think, though, she has become such a huge star that, again, she was just kind of, to me, kind of window dressing on this match. It's kind of like when they put some of the bigger names in there to kind of give the rub to the talent that's up and coming. And I mean, she's not even 30 yet. And I do think she's a phenomenal superstar. And I think that she's got a lot of time left to do a lot of big things in WWE. But I didn't think she necessarily needed to be a part of this match.
Yeah, I think she's one, and kind of talk about it with the men's match too, where she feels like she's the type of person who can get a title match no matter what. All she has to do is come out and say, "Hey, I want a title match," and the fans will buy into it.
Right.
And I think because over the last year, she has either been champion or been feuding with the champion. You know, I just, to me, her winning, the only reason I could see her winning would have been if they wanted to market Mommy in the Bank, kind of like they did with, you know, Damian Priest, Senior, Money in the Bank.
I like that. I didn't think about that. That's a good one.
Which, given the way WWE markets and promotes everything, I'm kind of surprised they didn't do. But Rhea wasn't needed. I think they could have given that spot to someone else to make it a more believable winner or potential winner. But it was her first ladder match in her career, so maybe she just wanted to mark that off the checklist.
And again, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, just some of those spots, it just, to me, I don't know why, it just, that danger factor, I guess. And obviously you don't want to see anyone get hurt. And I can't imagine that people don't get hurt somewhere along the way with that. I guess really, as I'm looking at the results now, I think that might have been the only match I actually missed. Because like I said, when I started watching, it was the men's Intercontinental Championship match with Dominic. Which no surprise there. I think that Dominic, again, I just think very highly of him. And we're going to talk more about him when we get to this father-son feuding and wrestling. But any thoughts on Dom?
The Latino cheat is, he should have been in Money in the Bank. He should be world champion by WrestleMania next year. He's someone that WWE should be marketing and promoting as the future.
Do you think he will be?
No.
Do you think he? I mean, he's come a long way. He may have some
time. Yeah. I mean, I think off the top of my head, and maybe it's because he gets a lot of TV time, but I think he has fully embraced. When he came in as just Ray's son, the very vanilla baby face. Had he stuck with that, I don't think he would be that over. but I think he's latched into that character and can play that character so well that if you watch, any type of interview with him off TV screens, he's still in character a lot of the times and can keep it going. So it's a believable character. Maybe he is just a douche in real life,
Well,
but no, he plays it well, and I think his skill level has risen as well.
yeah, I agree. Speaking of douches, well, maybe not a good transition here, but Becky Lynch. I thought Becky Lynch was the heel going into this Intercontinental Championship match for the women's side of things. But it felt like, and again, I had it on, but I was not. I was playing cards at the time, so I was kind of glancing down, and I saw that Becky Lynch won the Intercontinental Championship, but it looked like at the end they were kind of shaking hands, and she was raising via.
Well, that was the Lyra Valkyria. That was the stipulation that if Becky won, Lyra had to raise her hand and acknowledge her as.
Well, see, there you go to the paying attention part of things, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So she was hesitant to do it. So Becky Lynch is not a face.
No.
She's still okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I kept waiting for her to start beating her up or something. I'm like, wait, what is happening? Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Then I think it was the men's Money in the Bank match, which I was walking through Lowe's and kind of oohing and eyeing as there were spots being done, and some really impressive stuff. But again, the risk ratio. I thought it was kind of weird though how both the bloodline, are they still the bloodline? And then what's Seth Rollins' group called now? You remember?
Do they have a name?
I don't. The new Paul Heyman guys, I guess. But, it was I thought it was interesting that two heel factions came out and started kind of going at it, but obviously it was to set up. I felt like that was a long time to set up the seemingly Jacob Fatu face.
Yeah. Wrestling logic. Why wait 20 minutes to come out and attack your colleagues' opponents and risk someone winning the match before you get a chance to get out there?
Right.
And then, yes, when Jacob grabbed Solo's foot, and Solo just magically could never lift his foot again off the ladder. That's one heck of a grip. So Solo might want to watch out. The match was fine. And this is the complaint with WWE booking right now, too much interference, too many run-ins, no clean finishes through their matches. And even though it's a ladder match, there is no disqualification. Like I said, why have these two groups come out other than to get them on the show and to show that they're a group? I was not a fan of it. Was not a fan of Seth Rollins winning because, again, I think he could just come out and say, I wanted a match, although we'll see what happens on Raw the night that this episode drops when Gunther is facing Jay if Seth cashes in. But, again, I'm sure LA Knight fans are waking up crying in their Cheerios today.
I for a minute there, I did think, that is the one thing WWE does is they give you that, like, I think they do it better than anyone else as far as that false sense of hope where because I went into it thinking, okay, Seth Rollins will win this, but then there was a point where I'm like, LA Knight might actually do this, and then I thought for a second, surely they're not going to let Solo Sikoa win this.
Right. It should have been El Grande Americano.
Yeah, he didn't have a very good night between Worlds Collide.
But he was on Worlds Collide?
Well, his friend Chad Gable. I know that he.
I guess, if he was disappointed, his friend didn't win.
Chad.
Yeah.
But again, we talked about it last week. The whole concept of the Money in the Bank, we agreed, I think, is a bit overplayed, and it's not any fault of the performers, but to me, again, the concept has grown old, and now you've got someone that's a two-time winner, and I do think Seth had one of the best cash-ins back, 10 years ago now. It's hard to believe that was 10 years before he cashed in at WrestleMania 31. But yeah, I guess time will tell, like you said, because last year's winner cashed in that night, and we was forgotten, or I guess we did forget until we saw the replays that Drew McIntyre was in fact last year's winner and had a failed cash. So, do you think? I mean, it seems too early for Jey Uso to lose the championship, but I can never say never, I guess. How soon or how long do you think Seth Rollins holds on to this before he cashes in?
I mean, I would say Raw.
You think he'll cash in on Monday night?
I would have him cash in immediately and take the title. But again, I'm also not a Jey Uso fan, and one word, 4 letters, sucks. Actually, that's 5 letters. I put an S in there. But so to me, it would make sense for Seth to try to get the title as soon as possible to put that faction over a little bit more. But we'll see. Last time he held it until WrestleMania, and I don't know, since Money in the Bank is not until I believe September next year. Maybe he gets like 14 months time to cash it in instead of the year. So,
do you think they'll go with Braun and Bronson winning the tag team titles at some point and have the super faction kind of like Evolution?
I mean, I would. If you're trying to make them over, if you're trying to push them as the main guys, that would make sense. And I'm trying to think, I mean, are the New Day doing anything with the tag titles right now? And the Raw tag team division is pretty lackluster. So,
well, until you said that, I forgot that New Day was even the tag team champion. So, yeah, good point.
So,
speaking of tag teams, the main event featured John Cena and Logan Paul against Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso. This was Cody's return in the ring from WrestleMania. First time we've seen him wrestle. Logan Paul, again, I mean, that flip that he did across, I'm impressed with the guy. I know he's a douchebag in real life. I know that, he's polarizing.
Theme of the show.
Yeah, I know that he's polarizing and people don't like him. I'm impressed though, and I thought that I do think that he brings attention. His brand is almost as big as WWE's brand as a whole. If you look at the social media connection, at least. So, what'd you think of this though?
Yeah, I'm with you. Logan Paul is very athletic, and again, that goes. I think we discussed it a few weeks ago. The celebrity involvement in wrestling over the last 5 years has really stepped up from what it used to be of just get a celebrity in there for publicity's sake. Now they're actually bringing in people that can wrestle or, do things. I still don't like Logan Paul. I don't. I mean, if he's on a show, I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, oh yes, I have to watch this Logan Paul match. The thing that took me out of the match, and it's something that I read a couple days before, and I'd never noticed it, but last night or this morning when watching the show, I couldn't not see it, is when they switched to drone footage, how bad the resolution is. Like, it's like going from HD to SD. And so that was very distracting for me. But, I mean, when he's holding the drone and on the top rope and Cody rushes up and suplex him off, and then Jey hits the splash. It's a cool visual, but that that match itself, the Cena Logan storyline doesn't make sense. And again, it feels, I mentioned it when we talked about Cena's last round. It feels like they're skipping steps of the story part because Logan and Cena really didn't have any interactions prior to the end of Saturday Night's Main Event. Then all of a sudden they're tag teaming, and then they get into a fight. They argue during their match, and then that costs them the match. It's like, I don't know. It just, I hate to say it, but I think Cena needs to go away because I think his storylines are not. And I don't want to say they're ruining wrestling because I know that's what he's trying to do, but it. I think WWE will be better when he's no longer there.
Well, in 6 months, you will get
Be
that way.
gone. Yeah.
I slightly disagree. I do feel like the Cena heel turn has kind of been doesn't feel authentic, and
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about that ad nauseum. But um, I do think that him getting Logan Paul, because Logan Paul is so polarizing and so hated, and it would piss off the WWE fan base and wrestling. I mean, the AEW fans' heads would explode, literally, I think, if Logan Paul were to have ended up beating Jey Uso.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all part of this we're going to ruin wrestling idea. So I thought even if they did a unification match and Cena beats Jey Uso and then gifts the belt to
Mm-hmm.
Logan Paul, that would also add to this ruining wrestling mystique or whatever it is. But again, it hasn't felt authentic. I do think it was kind of a spur of the moment decision. And
Yeah.
speaking of spur of the moment decisions, what really to me is the walk away, takeaway from Money in the Bank. It's not Seth Rollins, it's not Naomi, it's not even the new Intercontinental Women's Champion, but it's the return of R-Truth. I again, I texted you last week
Mm-hmm.
when R-Truth put out. You sent me a snap or something that
Yeah.
R-Truth had been released. I said this has got to be a work, or I asked if this was a work. I never believed that he was really released. I guess there's cynics out there, and I'm gonna maybe throw some shade at you and call you one of those. I don't know. What do you feel like this was a work? Triple H addressed it during the press conference after the show and said it was all part of the show. What do you think? Was this all part of the plan? And if so, to me, it's kind of a weird, just the fact that it was 6 days, or that it
Mm-hmm.
transpired. It felt like it could have again, but again, this whole Cena thing is
Yeah.
very hurried, so maybe it's part of the whole thing.
I don't think it was a work just because other wrestlers have also either been have I guess released is not the right word, but have said their contracts will not be renewed, and that's Valhalla and Carlito. And there are rumors that they want to TKO wants to renegotiate Roman Reigns' deal because they think he's paid too much for his 3 appearances a year. Um, as long and the Miz took out all mention of WWE from his social media handles. And there's speculation about when his contract is up. So, in that regard, I don't think it's a work, but I wouldn't put it past them. And Truth coming back in 6 days reminds me of when CM Punk left with the title, after Money in the Bank. And it was going to be the Summer Punk. And then he was back within 2 weeks.
Yeah,
It's like they can't hold out, and is it because we want the Truth chance, during Raw and SmackDown? They wanted to bring Truth back to negate those chants. I don't know. It'll also be, I read right before we started recording that he's now going by Ron Killings. He's no longer R-Truth. Does this mean that he's going to be more of a serious competitor? And I mean, we'll see where it goes, but I think he should be the one to beat Cena for the title. I think that would be the ultimate payoff for the if this wasn't a work, or if this was a work, or even if it wasn't, I guess. But that just seems, I've said it before. I think Cody winning the title back is just kind of resetting back to square one. It doesn't really do anything. But if you put it on Truth, I think the fans will. I think it will get a bigger reaction than just giving it back to Cody.
yeah, I agree, and I do feel like there's got to be something in the works
Mm-hmm.
with this, as far as R-Truth or Ron Killings goes. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens and where things go from there. But uh, we've talked about Money in the Bank a lot longer than I had anticipated. But that's how this usually ends up going. Want to throw a few of these wrestlers, family feud, if you will. some of these matches we've actually seen before. Some people have speculated or thought about. But Chad, we'll go like in their prime. So obviously, Ric Flair today versus Charlotte Flair. I think Charlotte would kick Ric Flair's ass. But if we went back to 84, 85 Flair, 86 Flair versus, Charlotte in her prime, which I think probably has been probably the last previous years. I think that she's maybe heading towards a slowing down phase of her career. Who do you think wins? This would be probably the only, other than, of course, we saw Vince McMahon wrestle Stephanie McMahon before, but beyond that, who do you think would win a matchup between Ric Flair and Charlotte?
That is something I had never ever contemplated in life. No, I'm going to have to go with Rick. I just think Rick was more of an all-around natural wrestler, whereas Charlotte's good, obviously, much better than I would ever be in a wrestling ring. But I just give it to there's always been that saying that Flair could have a 5-star match with a broom handle or a broomstick. So I don't think Charlotte's ever been on that level. So.
And we don't have many father-daughter combinations. The only other one that comes to mind is Kelly and Tessa Blanchard. Now, Tessa Blanchard, we know what's that?
I say, would you have her face Tully or Magnum TA?
Magnum TA, yeah. Could be a triple threat match, I guess.
Yeah.
Tessa Blanchard, we know, was at one time TNA heavyweight, or was it Impact Wrestling?
World champion, yeah.
But she was their world's champion. So kind of an outside the box thing for a company to do. Very interesting. And I don't think we'll ever get a whole lot of intergender matches, but maybe one day. But do you think we'll ever see Tessa, now that there's this partnership with TNA and WWE, will we ever get that legit four horsewomen kind of thing going with Charlotte Flair, Tessa Blanchard, whether they wrestle each other or they become tag team partners? And then does Ric Flair and Tully Blanchard get involved with that as well?
I don't think. The problem right now is fans. And I don't know if you're aware, but whenever Tessa shows up on TNA, she gets greeted with "she's a racist" chants based on previous comments that have come to light. Or "we're coming to get you, Tessa." So I don't see WWE putting Tessa on screen because of that. Sadly, unfortunately. So no, I don't think we'll ever see it, just because I think that time is also kind of past where, maybe if you still had Bayley and Sasha in WWE, and I guess Bayley is still there, but I think the Four Horsewomen is just it's a relic of its time.
Sean Maccabee did suggest Barry Windham versus Blackjack Mulligan. And I don't remember if it was flipping through the magazine. I can't remember exactly when I figured out Barry Windham and Blackjack Mulligan were related, and then later found out that Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo were actually brothers. So I think now, as Barry has aged, he does look a lot like Blackjack. But I can remember, back in the day, Barry Windham was one of my favorites growing up when he was in the WWF, even though he wasn't there very long. And actually, he and Blackjack were there around the same time. So it's always been kind of an interesting thought to have those two go after each other. But I think, I know Blackjack was big in the 70s and probably early 80s, but Barry Windham, even though his time was kind of limited, I think that JCP, as part of the Horsemen, and even before he turned heel, had a pretty good one. Had some great matches against Ric Flair. I would give the edge on that one to the Son in this case, if it was Barry Windham.
Yeah, didn't he wrestle early in his career as Blackjack Mulligan Jr.?
I think he did, and then of course, obviously, the ill-fated new Blackjack with Bradshaw.
I don't remember. I don't think I've seen much of Blackjack Mulligan Sr. in his prime. I only know
Yeah.
him on the later stages of his career when he was, I believe he was wearing a mask, calling himself the Big Machine.
Yeah, he
Uh,
was part of that group. Yeah.
yeah. So I think Barry, it's often been said, Barry was probably one of the guys who never really lived up to the potential that he had, or the talent that he had. I know I
Yeah.
shouldn't say potential, but yeah, I'm going to have to go with Barry on this too, because I think Barry's the natural, the better wrestler. But then what about Kendall?
Yeah, I forgot about Kendall.
He was part of the
Blackjack.
rest.
What's that?
I said he was part of the West Texas Rednecks. How can you forget about Kendall?
That's true. They hated rap. Do
Yeah.
you remember Blackjack having the what it was? I don't remember if it was his own show or if he just was substituting for someone, but he was filling in that void after. I don't remember if it was before Piper retired or right after Piper retired, but he had a talk show, and I think it was called Blackjack Barbecue or something along those lines. But anyway, it was one of those talking segments. So
Uh,
I'm guessing
no,
you don't remember that.
no, I just go Piper's Pit, Flower Shop, Snake Pit. So,
You don't remember the Body Shop with Jesse Ventura?
yeah, I guess that one's in there too. But
Um, Another interesting matchup. You mentioned Natural earlier, so that brings, of course, obviously Dusty Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes, Cody Rhodes, uh, the Rhodes family. I don't know if you do a triple threat or if you do individual Cody versus Dusty, and then Dusty versus Dustin. We of course got the brothers match. I think it was the antithesis for AEW
AEW.
really launching.
Mhm.
Uh, to what it became. I think if Dusty had been a bit younger, I think we would have eventually maybe seen a Dustin and Dusty match. Uh, Either I thought, back in '94 when
Mhm.
Dustin, or I'm sorry, when Dusty came back and actually wrestled in WCW for a minute, and he teamed up with Dustin. I
Mhm.
thought they were kind of setting up something there for Dustin to turn on Dustin. It never happened, and I guess
Yeah.
I'm probably thankful that it didn't. But um, who do you think is the better Rhodes?
I'm gonna have to go with Dusty, but with Dustin, is he Dustin? Is he just the natural Dustin Rhodes, or does he get to be Gold Dust? Because
Yeah,
you know we've discussed it before. It's very odd how Dustin Rhodes, and I know he'll disagree with this based on recent comments, but doesn't really show the charisma that Gold Dust had. I mean, Gold Dust was such a great character,
yeah,
and but when he's just Dustin, he's missing something in that. But and Cody, I mean, Cody's for the new generation of wrestler, Cody is perfectly fine. But I think Dusty had uh, all the tangibles that you need to be a successful wrestler. He had the charisma, which is probably the big thing,
yeah.
and then the talent coming after that. Yes.
I was going to. To me, the one word that encapsulates and really separates Dusty not just from his own sons, but I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
other wrestlers today and of his era was the charisma. He did not have that Vince McMahon look of,
Mm-hmm.
of 300 pounds of solid muscle. He was, and he says it in his promo, I'm fat and flabby, and
Mm-hmm.
but there was something about him that we just as fans, especially back in the '80s, connected with. And then the way he talked, the way he walked, the way he wrestled, uh, he just was so smooth. And I agree with you. I think that in this case, the father gets his hand raised against both sons. Um, and I like to watching Cody the other day. He and Brandy. I don't know if it's a podcast or if it's just like some clips on social media, but it's a bunch of different little videos. I don't know if you've seen them or not. They're on. It looks like they're in the tour bus, and listening to Cody talk. I mean, there's just I like Cody, but there's something about him. I don't know if it's because it's too buttoned up and he's in the suit and he's just too straight laced and kind of it's the American nightmare and not the American. Dusty was the common man, blue jeans,
Mm-hmm.
t-shirt, can of chew, and
Yeah.
that was him. And Cody is this more sanitized version of that, and it's fit. You know, he's if you look at it, and I don't mean to sound like again for team of the day douche when I say this, but he's the anti-Dusty Rhodes, really. I mean, he's in good shape, dresses nice. He has been the WWE World Champion, or WWE Champion, where that was the one belt that eluded Dusty, and I think Dustin is kind of a combination. I like the Goldust character a lot more too. I haven't seen as much of him in AEW. I think he's probably carried some of that charisma over definitely compared to when he was the natural in WCW. But I do think Goldust was kind of that high point in his career.
Not to completely just shit on Cody like I do most of the time when we talk about him, but you make a point. To me, Cody is just too much of a product. Like it feels forced. The whole presentation feels like, okay, what boxes do I need to check to be the face of the company, to be the marketable wrestler? And maybe that's just why I don't get into him, and I just don't care about Cody.
I do think they did, whoever's decision it was, when he came back and made the save at Saturday night's main event, he was in a tracksuit. He was not suited up. So kudos for whoever's decision that was, because again, that kind of broke away from that typical sanitized version of Cody. Again, I like him, but I'm not, he's not the dream. And I think he would even admit that. But to this generation, I think probably most people younger than us, which is a lot of people, pretty much 95% of the fan base would disagree with us and go with Cody. So that's why I'm curious. That was the one that I thought of all of these scenarios was the one that would probably be the most, I don't want to say controversial or polarizing, but I think it would be the one that would be the most debated. So if you're listening or watching, Cody versus Dusty, who wins? Who was the bigger, better superstar? Even though Cody, I think, has had more accolades in the WWE, there's just something about Dusty Rhodes that, to me, just is going to be hard to beat. So, just like his prices at the butcher shop. We'll throw a couple more out there and the scenarios. I was looking for fathers and sons, and I think as much as I loved Rocky Johnson as a kid, I think The Rock would obviously eat his lunch, and same with Bob Orton versus Randy Orton. I don't know. Maybe you have a different take on this.
No, I didn't really see any Rocky Johnson in his prime. I didn't even really. I think the first time I saw Rocky Johnson was WrestleMania 13.
Oh, really?
Excited. I think he and Tony Atlas were already out of WWE by the time I started watching WWF. The Rock. Again, it's just the charisma factor. He's got it. It covers up a lot of shortcomings with the wrestling, but I don't think Rocky could have. And based on his persona in Young Rock, I don't think it probably really would have been that entertaining to go back and watch his matches. Bob Orton was just there. He was always like the sidekick. So Randy, as much as I have maligned Randy on this show several times over the last 10 years, if you put him up in a battle, it's going to be Randy. Unless Bob just keeps hitting him with his cast over and over.
That draft cast. We saw it in person. Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio at WrestleMania 39. Rey came out on top there, but I feel like when Rey retires, which I can't imagine is too terribly far off into the distance. I almost feel like Dominic is going to be the one to retire and actually get the dub and win. What do you think? Obviously Rey, I think is historically will go down as one of the all-time greats, an innovator, an influencer. of modern wrestling today, the luchadors that we talked about earlier on World Collide. I think Ray is one of those once in a generation talents. But man, I still think Dominic, the sky is the limit.
Yeah, I think right now Ray, obviously, he's the goat of lucha libre, or the chupacabra maybe of lucha libre. That'd be a better thing to say.
I love it.
But yeah, I know Dom is a 25-year veteran in the WWE, but we'll see where the next 25 years take him. I think the sky's the limits for him. But even if he succeeds the way that I think he will, like you said, Ray was just the trailblazer. He was the trying to think of other adjectives that would fit. I don't want to say he changed wrestling, but he changed. He brought in a whole new style, and I don't see Dom being that historically influential. I just see him being a great wrestler.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of greats, Braun Breaker has done a lot in his short career. Will he transcend Rick Steiner? I think if they were to wrestle, I think that Braun is the better as far as Rick Steiner was great. I think though, I always kind of pigeonhole him as being a tag team guy more so than a singles, even though I know he had like the TV title a couple of times. But when I think of Rick Steiner, I inevitably have him paired with Scott as a tag team, whereas Braun, I think, has proven himself in a short time as a legit single star. So throw Scott into the mix though, and Braun may have a little bit of trouble there.
Yeah, but I think what Braun really needs to get himself over is a cool catchphrase like Rick had. Until he gets something like "bite me," I just don't see. No, I think, and again, I think it's the difference in styles and evolution of the sport. I mean, obviously, Braun's uncle Scott, with the Frankensteiner and a lot of the things that he was doing before he became Big Papa Pump. We see Braun do, but I think Braun is just he's like the genetic engineered wrestler. And I don't know if he's as genetically engineered as some other wrestlers may be, but he, I see Rick, like you said, I associate him more with tag team wrestling than just as a singles wrestler. So, and obviously Braun has had the War Dog or the Wolf Dogs, I think that's what they're called, with Baron Corbin, and now they, see if they team him up with, I can't think of his name, Bronson Reed. Yeah, I want to say Jonah, but I give that one to Braun in the battle of the.
Unless I think of anything else in the next couple of minutes here, tag teams. I know it's not father-son, but the Usos and the Wild Samoans, Appa and Sika, they're all part of this bloodline. Obviously, you could throw in lots of, Rikishi into the mix.
I was going to say Rikishi, Jay, Jimmy, or Solo.
Rikishi was Fatu, and he teamed with Samu, who
Tonga Kid, right?
No, I don't think Samu was Tonga Kid.
Oh.
I don't think, but they're all part of that bloodline. Obviously great tag teams there with the Head Shrinkers, or back when they were in the WCW, they were the Samoan SWAT team, the Wild Samoans, and then of course Jimmy and Jay Uso, the Usos. I think Usos have been kind of almost given that GOAT status as well as far as tag teams go in modern wrestling, especially. Yeah. But I caught the tail end of the Wild Samoans. My biggest memories of the Samoans was Sika as kind of an enhancement talent in 87, 88, and Appa coming back to manage the Head Shrinkers in the New Generation era. So I do think that Usos probably get the props there. Rikishi, as a single versus Jay or Jimmy.
Mhm.
I think Rikishi had a nice little push there for a bit, but I don't think he ever quite got over that hump of main event status.
Mhm.
I'm sure he would disagree with that.
I'm sure. And yeah, his booking was probably not what he wanted, but yeah, and again, I think it goes to the difference in styles and presentation of what wrestling was and is today. That the Usos would be the more uh, words escape me, but yeah, Usos would if we were bracketing this out and having a competition, Usos would win.
And since you said bracketing, maybe this will be next year's my 1, 2, 3 cents madness topic. We'll have to wait and see. But any other combos that you can think of off the top of your head that you want to throw out there before we wrap
Yeah,
up?
I'll give you the lightning round just real
Okay.
quick. Larry the Axe or Kurt, Mr. Perfect?
Mr. Perfect.
Corey Guerrero or Eddie Guerrero?
The Guerrero. I have no recollection of seeing Gory actually wrestle, so I got to go with the King there.
All right, Chavo Classic or Chavo Jr.?
I do remember Chavo Classic wrestling back in the day in the UWF. He was the TV champion. To me, Chavo Jr. never resonated, and I hate to say that. I feel like, and maybe it was just the booking, I felt like he was more in Eddie Guerrero's shadow. But I am going to still go with Chavo Jr.
Okay. Nick Patrick or his father, who was the assassin, I believe?
Yeah, Jody Hamilton. I go with Jody, I guess.
And last one, Gorilla Monsoon or Joey Morella?
Man, rest in peace, both of them. I love, for whatever reason, fans, I think in the era, if you go by the dirt sheets and whatnot, they were not very kind to Gorilla, but I love Gorilla and Bobby together, even in Gorilla and Jesse. So Gorilla is one of the all-time greats. So I go with Gorilla.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Joey ever wrestled, but I know he's just a referee.
Yeah, Gorilla was done in the ring by the time I started watching.
Oh yeah,
but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, and then I guess to end it where we started it, Rick or David?
Oh, Nature Boy, of course. And that's actually what kind of started this whole idea was scrolling through TikTok, and there was a match that I had forgotten existed. It was Ric Flair and Vince Russo in a cage. And they end up on top of the cage, and then they end up back in the ring. And this was after the whole Foley Undertaker match. Do you remember this at all?
If it's from WCW in like 99, 2000, no.
It was 2000. It was 25 years ago this month. So, or maybe end of May. It ends with Nature Boy being locked in a figure four. Or I think he had the figure four locked on Russo, and then the blood pours out from the ceiling, and then Russo ends up getting on top of him with the help of David, and that's what made me think, David and Rick. As much as I think they wanted David Flair to be like Rick, it just didn't work.
Well, and then obviously I know your answer on this one, but given your fandom, Fritz or any of the Von Erich kids?
Yeah. I would go Kerry all day. I think, again, by the time I started watching, Fritz had already retired, but had come back and done a couple of matches. But I think all three. I think Kevin, Kerry, and David, all three would have been the bigger, better stars than Fritz.
I just keep coming up with these bad choices. Cowboy Bob or Eric Watts?
Oh, Bill Watts. Wow. Yeah, Eric Watts was not very good. I don't think so. Probably go with Bob on that. Or Bill.
Yeah, Bill Watts. Yeah. Bill Watts. All right. I think that's it. I think I'm out of father, son.
Linda McMahon or Stephanie McMahon?
I think we all lose on that one.
And speaking of families and losing, apparently Nikki Bella is going to be on Raw.
Yes. I was just going to bring that up. That was the big takeaway that I saw from Money in the Bank is that your favorite diva of all time is back. And real quick, going off Money in the Bank too. You watched the show probably more. I know you missed the beginning,
Yeah.
first match, but when I just would scroll through, try to skip the commercials, I did see that they acknowledged Travis Barker and Khloe Kardashian.
Yes, I saw it.
But did they acknowledge Danielle Fishel sitting right behind her with Jensen Carp, former WWE writer?
I don't think. Well, again, I had it sitting there. I was playing cards when that popped up. I looked down and I'm like, who the hell are those people? And then they put the Chiron, so then I knew who it was because I didn't have the sound on. So again, disconnected from that world. But yeah, they're gonna do what they do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny because when they were at the Intuit for the Netflix, they did show Danielle and acknowledge her, but Will Friedle was right next to her, and so he started calling himself Seat 4C on the podcast. So
maybe she should have wore the Danhausen like her new action figure from Collect Major.
Yeah.
All right, friends. Well, weigh in. Let us know. Again, I'm curious about the Cody versus Dusty match. Let us know who wins that one, and leave your comments, good or bad. And hopefully by next week or in a couple of weeks, I'll be back in my studio. I know June is a busy month, so we'll be traveling and doing some shows, maybe even on the road. But Chad, thanks for joining. It's always a pleasure.
Great to be here. Now I'm going to go back to bed because I feel like I've been hit by a Mack truck.
All right, man. Take care. Friends, thank you for listening and or watching to this week's episode, and we will see you next time.